Afternoon, guys. So we're just going to look at finishing off at different types of numbers. So we've already looked at prime numbers, multiples, factors. You should already know some more, which you can probably already say at me, which is like evens, odds, those kind of numbers as well. So you should already know all of them. I know we've kind of covered these in the past couple of lessons as well. So today we are going to, so if anyone was reading this wonderful top line here, you will probably see that there are square and triangular numbers. So you can probably see my fabulous drawing here. Obviously, if I had square paper, then it would be much neater. And I know some of you are like much better artists than I will ever be because very gifted. So you probably will be drawing much better squares than I am. Okay, so these are essentially the square numbers. So first square, yes, I know it just looks like a dot, but it is just 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. Okay, second square, 2 lots of 2, 4, 3 lots of 3, 9. Okay, so you should have 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, let's put a comma after that, 36, and then you can keep going. So whereas this one was a 1 by 1 square, that is 1. This is a 2 by 2 square, so that's 2 times 2 is 4. 3 by 3 square, which is 9. You have a 4 by 4, which is 16, and then you have 25, 36. I know a few of you are going, well, the next ones are 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144, 169, 196, 225. However, you want to go ahead, which is all good. Okay, so those are your square numbers. And some of you might be going, oh, but what about the triangulars? Okay, triangulars, how do I find a triangle? You're half a square, right? So just split it down the diagonal and there is your triangular. This one I can't really split, so this one is just as it is, which is 1. And then if I just split it down the middle, how many dots do I have now? 3. 6. 10. 15. 21. Okay, so with the triangular numbers, all you're doing is you are just taking those squares and just splitting them in half. So you do get 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21. And when we were doing sequences, you might remember this as a sequence as well, where how much you are adding helps you get to the next number. So for the first one, you're adding 2, then you're adding 3, then you're adding 4, then you're adding 5, then you're adding 6. So what would I do for the next one? Of course, you would add 7, and that would be your triangular numbers. Okay, so it's essentially just triangles. I know, sounds so simple because it is. Okay, and the last one I want you guys to check out, which isn't actually covered by there, but I think it's a very useful one to cover, which is cube numbers. So you should all be aware of 2D now, because obviously 2D is the shapes that we draw. So your squares, your rectangles, your rhombus, your rectangle, your parallelogram, trapezium, those are all your 2D shapes, okay? And when you go from 2D into 3D, that's when you start going into cubes, spheres, and that kind of stuff, okay? So these would be your square numbers, and you usually see the term like that. If you look on your fabulous calculators, you might not have this one. You might have something that's slightly different, but you do usually see an x squared, okay? And then to go from 2D into 3D, it would be instead a cube. So you see 3D, so it's to the power of 3. 2D to the power of 2. You also have 1D, but obviously 1D is just one-dimensional, which is just a straight line. That's 1D, okay? So 1D would just be a straight line. 2D would be, oh, I've now made a two-dimensional shape, which is a flat and a piece of paper, which is most drawings. And then 3D is when you go three-dimensional and you start thinking about making it into a physical shape. So whereas this drawing is two-dimensional because it's flat on a piece of paper. This pencil case would obviously be three-dimensional because it's it's kind of cuboid in design. Obviously, it's got rounded edges and everything else, but it's 3D because now I've got the added dimension of depth. Okay, so that would be your three-dimensional. So I only say this because you go from square numbers and then you can go into cube numbers. So if you have your square and you've got a 1 by 1 square, that's then 1, okay? If I have a 2 by 2 square, that's then 2, so the area would be 4. And then if you have a 3 by 3 square, the area would be 9. If you have a 4 by 4, the area would be 16 square units, okay? So obviously your square numbers are the areas. And then if you want to go from two-dimensional into three-dimensional by adding the depth, that's when we add that dimension and we say, well, if it's 1 up and 1 across, then that also means it's 1 deep. So 1 times 1 times 1. So whereas the square numbers was 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 4, the cube numbers, I'm doing it twice because it's two-dimensional. How many times am I going to do if it's three-dimensional? Hopefully someone said 3 times. Okay, so that's 1 times 1 times 1. What would I do if I have a cube that is 2 across, 2 down, and 2 deep? That would then be 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Okay, what would I do for the next one? It's a 3 by 3 by 3, which is 27. And I'm sure none of you are going to be surprised by the next one, which is a 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64. Okay, so when you are talking about just a length, obviously that's your one dimension. When you are talking about squares, you're talking about the area. So I'm talking about the area of that forward face that is facing us. That's your two-dimensional. And then your three-dimensional would be using the whole depth as well. And then that depth would give you volume. Okay? So these are your cube numbers. Okay? And then obviously you can make the cube numbers go up. So after 64, it would be 125, then 216. Okay? So you can always just make them go up. And as I've told you in the past, it's always good to know at least your first 15 square numbers and try and get at least 6 cube numbers, okay? And then that way, when you're doing stuff, you can do it straight off the bat. So if I said, oh, what's the square root of 89? You can kind of estimate that it's between 9 and 10 because you understand that 9 squared is 81 and that 10 squared is 100. Does that make sense? Hopefully it should make sense. Okay, so all you need to do is apply your knowledge that you have of previous numbers, which is your prime numbers, multiples, factors, as well as square and triangular numbers. And you have that fabulous sheet over there. So it should be a fantastic way to end the week because you're able to do something that's nice and joyous and shouldn't take too long. Okay, so have fun, do enjoy. If you have any questions, please do let me know, okay? Or if you just want to spread the joy of the weekend, then just pop a comment. It's perfectly fine. I'm still trying to find pigeons. It's all good. It's just a random pigeon update. But anywho, I will leave you be. Make sure you guys get some vitamin D and enjoy. Have a nice weekend, okay? Toodles.